to start, I'd love to hear from you all. So who comes to mind for you when you think of really exceptional speakers and communicators? This could be politics, business, Hollywood. Obama, 99% of the time, he is the first. Brene Brown, she's my personal favorite. Steve Jobs, we'll see him today. Michelle Obama, great Steve Jobs. PewDiePie. Middle, yes. Doug McMillan, Simon Sinek. I mentioned him a lot in my longer version of this presentation. We got Give Again, awesome. So what all of these speakers have in common is because of the way they communicate, they're very effective at changing how others think and shaping their actions. But what I find most fascinating is that when you break it down, it turns out they're all doing the exact same thing to have the impact that they have. And that will be the focus of today's session. What are they doing to have this impact, to be so exceptional, to come to mind when I ask you this question? And how can you start applying some of those tools and techniques? One of the primary things they have in common is they hit the communication sweet spot. Research tells us there are two qualities that account for more than 90% of the impressions that others form of us. This applies if you're leading a meeting or a team, if you're in a one-on-one, if you are on a TED stage. Across the board, subconsciously, we assess others on these qualities. I will speak to both Oprah and Clinton, but so you know the qualities, they are warmth and competence. So, and it's that order. So we first look to, do I like and trust this person? Do I feel a sense of authentic connection with them? Are they passionate? And then we look to, do they have expertise? Am I confident in their abilities to get the job done? Are they knowledgeable? And well, I'll bring this to life for you. We'll look at a concrete example so you can see it in practice. But what's important to know is that we communicate warmth and competence in 3 different ways. We communicate it through our actual content. This is the difference if I just give you stats, data, research, versus I'm actually bringing to life my content with stories, especially personal stories. You know that I care. There's more emotional resonance in the content. That's the warmth piece. But then I also back it up with data, stats, research. Then there's your voice. So I could be sharing this exact same content and speaking really quickly and have lots of uptalk, but that's very different than when I slow down. My voice is more resonant. There's more vocal variety. I'm not just monotone and sharing. This is really exciting and powerful. And as we'll see later, our voice accounts for a full quarter of our impact when we're speaking. And then lastly, there's our body language. So we're virtual right now, but in person, I could have arms crossed. A lot of speakers speak this way, or later we'll see Elon Musk, unfortunately, just not as powerful and confident as he could be with his body language. And so just to know, when I'm open, when I'm expansive and gesturing, again, I come across as warmer and more competent. And as I mentioned, we're most impactful when we first demonstrate warmth and then competence. The way I think about this is connect and then lead. So you first have to create a sense of authentic connection. We'll see Steve Jobs do this. We'll see Oprah right now. We'll see Bill Clinton. And that's where really influence and impact is. Because if you think about it, you want a really receptive audience. They're relaxed, they're engaged, they're on board. And then when you tell them something, they're more likely to follow that message. And in the next clip, we'll watch, so this is a debate between George Bush and Bill Clinton in 1992. They're asked the same question, but you see they respond very differently. And Bush never quite gets the question asker on board. He doesn't connect. Versus Bill Clinton, he just beelines and it's pure connection, and then he shows the competence. So what I'd love for you to do is watch this video and notice, what does each speaker do to demonstrate warmth or a lack of it, and then competence or a lack of it in those 3 ways: their content, voice, and body language.
We have a question right here.
Yes, how has the national debt personally affected each of your lives? And if it hasn't, how can you honestly find a cure for the economic problems of the common people if you have no experience in what's ailing them?
Well, I think the national debt affects everybody. Obviously, it has a lot to do with interest rates. It has.
She's saying you personally.
On a personal basis, how has it affected you?
Has it affected you personally?
Well, I'm sure it has. I love my grandchildren. I want to think
Wow.
that think that they're going to be able to afford an education. I think that that's an important part of being a parent. Maybe I won't get it wrong. Are you suggesting that if somebody has means, that the national debt doesn't affect them?
Well, what I'm saying,
I'm not sure I get it. Help me with the question and I'll try to answer.
I've had friends that have been laid off from jobs.
Yeah.
I know people who cannot afford to pay the mortgage on their homes, their car payment. I have personal problems with national debt. But how has it affected you? And if you have no experience in it, how can you help us if you don't know what we're feeling?
I think she means more the recession, the economic problems today the country faces, than the
you ought to be in the White House for a day and hear what I hear and see what I see and read the mail I read and touch the people that I touch from time to time. I was in the Lomax AME church. It's a black church just outside of Washington, D.C. And I read in the bulletin about teenage pregnancies, about the difficulty that families are having to make ends meet. I talked to parents. I mean, you got to care. Everybody cares if people aren't doing well. But I don't think it's fair to say you haven't had cancer, therefore you don't know what it's like. I don't think it's fair to say, whatever it is, if you haven't been hit by it personally, but everybody's affected by the debt because of the tremendous interest that goes into paying on that debt. Everything's more expensive. Everything comes out of your pocket and my pocket. So it's that. But I think in terms of the recession, of course you feel it when you're president of the United States. That's why I'm trying to do something about it by stimulating the export, investing more, better education system. Thank you. I'm glad to clarify.
Tell me how it's affected you again.
Um,
You know people who lost their jobs, lost their homes.
uh-huh.
Well, I've been governor of a small state for 12 years. I'll tell you how it's affected me. Every year, Congress and the president sign laws that make us do more things. It gives us less money to do it with. I see people in my state, middle-class people, their taxes have gone up in Washington and their services have gone down, while the wealthy have gotten tax cuts. I have seen what's happened in this last 4 years when, in my state, when people lose their jobs, there's a good chance I'll know them by their names. When a factory closes, I know the people who ran it. When the businesses go bankrupt, I know them. And I've been out here for 13 months, meeting in meetings just like this ever since October, with people like you all over America, people that have lost their jobs, lost their livelihood, lost their health insurance. What I want you to understand is the national debt is not the only cause of that. It is because America has not invested in its people. It is because we have not grown. It is because we've had 12 years of trickle-down economics. We've gone from first to 12th in the world in wages. We've had 4 years where we produced no private sector jobs. Most people are working harder for less money than they were making 10 years ago. It is because we are in the grip of a failed economic theory. And this decision you're about to make better be about what kind of economic theory you want. Not just people saying, I'm going to go fix it, but what are we going to do? What I think we have to do is invest in American jobs, American education, control American healthcare costs, and bring the American people together again.
Big difference. And I see some comments here so that Clinton had more empathy, and we saw that he walked toward her, eye contact, he asked her a question, and he put them on the same side. You know people, I know people. Versus Bush, there was more defensiveness was mentioned in the comments. We see that through his body language, turning to the side. It's like this warmth, this connect first. Let me try to understand where you're coming from. With a lot of respect. This is important to you. This matters. And let me tell you how I can relate to what you're saying. He answered the question underneath the question, right? He wanted to know that they could relate and really understand where she and people like her were coming from. A lot of respect. We see that in his voice. He has a warmer tone of voice. And then the warmth to competence, he gets stronger at the end. He fires off a bunch of stats. His body language gets stronger. So his content changes throughout. Bush University professor is very matter of fact. Again, this piece of knowing your audience, he opened talking about interest rates, right? When it was clear that wasn't what she cared about. It was the relatability to her question. He had more time to prepare. Yeah, I was asked, what happens when you don't have a lot of time to think through it? I'll say two things on that. One, even if you don't know what to say right away, as Clinton did, you can ask a question, right? I'd love to know, where are you coming from? What's important to you about this? Or you know people that have had this experience. So you can buy yourself time by trying to understand. Later, we'll talk about certain structures you can use. So even if you don't know fully what you're going to say, you just start with the first piece of the structure. And then also, at the end, we're going to send out our we'll put full thinking about it. So he's showing that he cares, he's thoughtful, even though he doesn't start speaking right away. What should it seem like? Attacking, yep. So it depends how you do it. This is more attacking versus Clinton did this, so it's a bit stronger. So it's amazing, but these little things matter, right? If I'm presenting this way or if I'm presenting like this, I mean, it's just a small adjustment, but it does make a big difference in how you and your message is perceived, and we'll talk more about body language later. But as you can see, the content you use, Clinton talked about, I know people, and on the ground, I know people by name, people like you, so the language you use, your voice, your body language, all of that has a really powerful impact. Clinton was very relatable, and interest rates, yep, great. And so now we'll go into each of those buckets, content, voice, and body language, and how you can start hitting that sweet spot. So for content, it's pathos and logos, right? It appeals to emotion and appeals to logic. What would you say is more important when you have a message to share? Appealing to emotion or logic? You just chat it in or call it out. Pathos, yes. Both are important. They both reinforce each other. They're most powerful together, but if you only have one, it's emotion. Emotion is what gets us to pay attention, to actually take action when we're fueled. When we feel angry or inspired, we are more likely to act. And they found when we make a decision, even if we tell you it was logical, they found we're just post-justifying an emotional decision we already made and using the data to back it up. So one of my favorite examples of pathos, and step one of this, of having that warmth piece with your content, is really to know your audience. So when I taught at Stanford Business School, we would have Joe Biden's chief speechwriter come into the class to guest lecture. And he said when Obama had one message to share to the nation, but lots of different speaking engagements around the country, he would have at least 12 different speechwriters for the same message. And their job was to know each area of the country so intimately. He wanted to know the West Coast. What do they care about? What's on their mind now? Where do they have resistance? In the Northeast, in the Midwest. And I'd say that's one of the main reasons why he's the first person 99% of the time mentioned in the beginning of this, is because he resonated. He really understood this is what people care about right now. This is what motivates and inspires, and here's where they have resistance, and let me speak to that. And so step one, know your audience. And most speakers think, what do I want to say? Here's what I've learned, here's my research. But the best speakers think, what does my audience need to hear? They're in service of their audience. And we just saw that between Bush, what he wanted to say, what he knew, interest rates, versus what does she need to hear that I understand, I've been on the ground. And so often when we're speaking to our team or senior leaders or customers, to really, and I'll talk about a few questions you can ask, but to take the time, not just what do I know and what do I have to say and what do I care about, but what does my audience care about and what do they need to hear to get on board with this idea? I'll share one of my favorite examples of this. So this comes from Texas. Anyone here from Texas? You can just chat yes. Been to Texas. Sure, a lot of you, yes. Great. So in the 1980s, Texas had a huge littering problem. They were spending millions of dollars trying to convince people not to litter, cleaning up litter, nothing was working. So they said, we need some type of intervention. Let's come up with a campaign to get people to stop littering. And so do y'all remember Smokey the Bear from growing up? Yeah. So they came out with Woodsy the Owl. Like, great. They're going to see this cute little owl. They're going to stop littering. What do you think happened? Do you think this was effective? Yes, no. Getting some head shakes, no. Not only was it not effective, littering actually went up. People started littering more after Woodsy came out. They're like, we hate this owl. We're going to litter more. So they said, clearly we don't understand our audience. Who is our audience? It turned out to be men between the ages of 18 and 35, and these very macho men with a lot of Texas state pride. So instead, I saw David wrote this. They came out with, "Don't mess with Texas. This is our state, don't mess with it, don't litter." Over the course of 4 years, littering went down almost 80%, which is completely unheard of in these types of interventions, and they saved $4 million. With 4 words. So just such a great example of, what it was from. It's an anti-littering campaign. If you get the right message to the right audience, it's a game changer, right? They completely tapped into their ethos, the way this audience thought, and it was a game changer. And so for you, what this means is 2 questions. And as I mentioned, Gibble sent out a Google folder with resources and et cetera. There's a worksheet that asks you to, before you have either a prepared speaking engagement or impromptu, to think about, who is my audience? And it asks, what does my audience care about most? Saving time, saving money, impact, whatever it is that will most motivate them to take action. But then you can have the best ideas in the world, right? Let's say you're trying to convince someone to start a meditation practice, and you're like, you'll be calm, you'll be grounded, it'll be amazing, clear thinking. But if they're so busy and they're like, I have no time for anything, there's no way I can spend time meditating, or I don't know how, this is overwhelming, they won't do it. So you have to also think, what biases or hesitations might they have? This will cost too much money, take too much time, I don't know how. What level of knowledge do they bring? Do they understand, like you do, how much this is actually a problem based on their experience? And so even if you just take 5 minutes before a really important meeting, sharing something with your team, pitching something, this can be really powerful, because the language you use and the way you frame something, the stories you tell can speak to these, and you'll be much more effective. Are there any questions on that before we move to the next piece? Just scrolling through questions.
One question is, how did they link the "Don't mess with Texas" slogan to this idea of not littering? It seemed like there was some work done to build those connections between state pride and the actual activity. Was there an overarching campaign?
Yeah, so that they found that these men are very protective, right? They kind of like defending and protecting, and kind of this like male ego energy, like framing it that way. And so they said, wow, if we frame littering as messing with our land, right, messing with our state, it would bring out this defensiveness. And what was interesting is, not only did they stop littering, they started policing other people when they litter. So like their friends are littering, like, dude, why are you littering, right? Don't mess with our state. So does that answer your question? You're saying, how did they create the link?
Well, I see, like, so there was clearly a lot of work done behind the scenes to get to the slogan, but I'm wondering, like, in terms of what actually surfaced to these people in Texas, I'm assuming they didn't just give them the slogan. They did something to say littering equals messing with. And like, I'm wondering where that link came from.
Yep, I don't know exactly what went beyond the actual campaign itself. I think this went out all through Texas, but I'm guessing there were messages of, you are destroying the state and the impact, to create that link. And you could do testing, right? You put that out, it's resonating, but how can we go even further, and what more could we do? And as the question is, when an audience has a dated idea on product but still has a big voice within the company, a lot of times you just need to convince people, and we'll speak to, I'll get that when I get to structure, which is next, actually. So when you have a message to share, often our message isn't clear, or a lot of people say, like, I'm not very concise, right? We hear speakers, it's just kind of all over the place. So how can you have a really clear, crisp message? And so 2 main structures. One is a persuasive structure. So this is, some of you might have heard this: problem, solution, benefit. 99.9 of political speeches, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, problem, solution, benefit. So this would be, in the last 6 months, we've lost 100,000 customers. Here's how I propose we solve this problem that we're losing customers, and here are now the benefits of this solution. Often we leave off the benefits, and that's actually one of the most powerful pieces, right? This is the I have a dream. You're painting a picture of the world on the other side of your solution. It gets people to say, I want that. That sounds amazing, and to get them to take action. often we don't fully describe the problem. So if the audience doesn't understand how important this is and what's at stake with that problem, they also won't take action. So again, it's the knowing the audience. Are they familiar with this problem? Do they know what a big deal it is? Clearly describing your solution and then hitting home the benefits of it. And I'll mention it doesn't always have to be a problem. It could be an opportunity. We have an opportunity to get 1 million customers in the next 6 months. Here's how I propose we do it. And then here are the benefits of doing it this way and what the world could look like if we do. And then there's informatives. I'm not trying to convince you to do something or persuade. I'm just letting you know the facts. So we just lost, unfortunately, 100,000 customers. Here's what this means now for our budget or for Q2. I propose we spend the next day reworking the budget or coming up with a strategy. Here's what comes next. Or here's our strategy for Q2. Here's why we're doing it this way. And now here's what we're going to do to execute it. You're just letting them know the facts. This is also really helpful if you have bad news to deliver. So Airbnb had a lot of layoffs. And it's actually published what they shared for the layoffs, and it's exactly this structure. Here's what we're doing. We have to do layoffs with COVID. Here's how we decided who would be laid off and how many people. And now here's what will happen next. Here's how you'll be notified if you are laid off. Here's how you'll be taken care of. Especially in times of crisis, it makes people feel really calm. They understand what is happening, why it's happening. The why is really important, and then what will come next. So that this is really great structure for having greater clarity. And so anytime you have a speaking situation, you're just saying, what structure will I use? And then also the more you do it, it'll become more second nature for impromptu. So this helps you get structured. Then you want to take that structure and bring it to life with stories and examples. That we go back now to the warmth piece, what really connects and persuades. Chip Heath, a colleague of mine at the business school, he wrote a phenomenal book, Made to Stick. I think this is one of the best readings on communication. In the resource guide that you'll receive at the end, the first chapter is in there, an electronic copy. But essentially he said, why are there some ideas that stick? Why are there commercials from the 1980s, 40 years ago, that we still remember? The Where's the Beef commercial, if you guys remember that. Why are there urban legends? Why do we cite JFK's inaugural address from so many years ago, right? It was one of the shortest, but it's one of the only ones that's quoted. So what is it about these ideas that makes them memorable, engaging, and makes people take action based on them? JFK's inaugural address asked not what your country can do for you, mobilize the nation into public and civil service. So he came up with 6 elements of sticky ideas. And when he looked at presentations, he found the #1 mistake, and there was no close second, was the message is too abstract. So speakers, whether prepared or impromptu, they talk about concepts, conclusions, without grounding it in stories and examples. Right, so I could just end here, but that's not as powerful now as if I give you an example. When I talked about knowing your audience, I could have just said, know your audience, it makes a difference, but I talked about Obama, don't mess with Texas story. So stories are what bring messages to life. I'll give you some examples. So we're gonna watch a clip. This is Steve Jobs, and he's essentially asked, what's some of the best advice you would give? And his advice is, you should ask for help. And if you were most speakers, as I mentioned, he'd say, you should ask for help. It makes a big difference. I try to help others. It'll really set you apart. But again, not so memorable, engaging, motivating. And so instead, he takes that advice and then he brings it to life with a concrete story.
I've actually always found something to be very true, which is most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book, and he answered the phone himself. He said, yes? He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive, to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them.
Big difference, right? So what made this more effective, the story? How did that change the impact for you? You can chat or call out. Very personal. We see him as a young kid. It's very unexpected, right? So that's one of the elements of sticky ideas, something surprising. He made it personal, concrete. We're actually picturing something in our mind. So now it's a visual, immersive experience. Personal stories, it was vulnerable. So the story, so I'm guessing a year from now, if I asked you what was his advice, you're much more likely to remember because of that story than if he just shared generic advice. So everything that you're saying, so research tells us that stories make your message 22 times more memorable. They looked at recall weeks and then months later. So you're much more likely to remember a message with a story. We like you better. We feel more connected to you, to Steve Jobs. Later we'll watch Oprah because you're sharing something personal in this case. And more impactful. So when the same message is paired with a story, people were twice as likely to donate in a study that they did. So stories are game changers. All the best speakers, Obama, huge storyteller. And so a nice close, yep, shiny. And so a good way to think about this is whenever you have a message to share, you want 3 parts to that message. You want the headline, what is my message? Ask for help. Then you want to bring it to life with a concrete story or example where we see it play out in practice. Then you want to hit home the relevance. Why does this matter? Or what does this mean you should now do because of this that I'm sharing with you? Now you're taking what you take it's your message, you bring it to life, you're creating a shared reality for the audience, and now you're connecting it to the audience so they can take action based on it. And what's important here is that often we don't have an example, or it's kind of an afterthought. It's like a lot of abstract content, and then let me throw in an example. But as you saw with Steve Jobs, the bulk is example, right? It's really example with a short headline and a short relevance. When I talked about don't mess with Texas, it was really know your audience, mostly the story, and then here's what this means for you. So I would even think about it as 80% example, 10% headline and relevance. Not exact, but generally the story is the entree, and I'll give you more examples of this. So what's your story? What does this look like? So let's say you're speaking to your product team, you want to persuade them something, and so you come up with, I'm going to use problem solution benefit. And so you're going to take the problem that's you're all facing right now. You share the headline, bring it to life with an example, hit home the relevance. So let's say in this case, your message is, I think we have some bad news to share. I think we really need to be mindful of how we communicate this to customers. So in this, you want to bring this to life with a story. So you might talk about Netflix. Gib, I'm guessing you remember this?
Those bastards, yes, of course I remember them.
Do you want to share briefly what happened?
Yeah. This is the Quickster debacle. So you had DVD by mail in the US and you had streaming, and they were worried they would focus too much on the DVD. They spun out, they created a plan to spin out Quickster, and that was derided. By Saturday Night Live of that week, all the comedians were having a field day with this stupid name called Quickster. Mm-hmm.
And that they unbundled the streaming and DVD by mail, and it was 2 different sites, and they had to pay more money, and it was this whole thing. They lost, I think, almost 1 million customers over this.
800,000. Yeah. And they went from 40 billion market cap to 10 billion market cap. Imagine you're the CEO and that happens to you.
Right. And a lot of people said this was a good business decision, but it just wasn't communicated to customers or executed the right way for customers.
What Reed said was the price increase is no big deal. It's about the same as the price of a non-fat vanilla latte grande, which is not speaking to normal people.
Yes. But now telling the story, right? Your team is like, we really need to be mindful, right? There are huge implications if we don't communicate in a way that's effective. So again, it's the story that's really the game changer, that's persuasive. And then you hit home the relevance. So what this means is if we don't communicate, we could lose customers, you know, all these things could happen as a result. If this were a full presentation, then you would move to the solution. So I think what we need to do is X. And then maybe you share an example of Google or another company that also had bad news, but shared it in a way that was powerful, customers accepted. So I'll give you one more example. So this would be solution. Headline example, relevant. So let's say you say, you know, I think we need to place more big bets. We're not taking big bets enough in our team. So maybe you tell the story of Instagram stories. At the time, this was not obvious it would work. It was more of a big bet. Instagram had this hockey stick growth, kind of leveled off, place this big bet, and then huge growth again. And so again, you're convincing the audience through this concrete example to take the action you want them to take. And why this is also helpful is because you can use the entire story of Instagram to show how did they choose this big bet in particular? How did they execute on it? And each step of the process, you're walking them through Instagram's full story and then pulling out the key highlights and takeaways for them to apply. And I'll just mention here, for stories, it's either a personal story, something that happened to you, this has two jobs, childhood, on a past team, in a past company. It's the story of someone else. So you heard me talk about Steve Jobs, Obama, or the story of a company, right? Instagram, Netflix, all stories you can pull from. And then again, that I mentioned, you want to include the benefits. And this is really the vision. This is why Steve Jobs was a master communicator. He would share the vision of what's possible. We'll see Oprah do this at the end. And now I'll just play a quick clip of Steve Jobs talking about his vision for the World Wide Web.
So I think that the web is going to be profound in what it does to our society. As you know, about 15% of the goods and services in the US are sold via catalogs or over the television. All that's going to go on the web and more. Billions and billions, soon tens of billions of dollars worth of goods and services are going to be sold on the web. If you could, a way to think about it is the ultimate direct-to-customer distribution channel. Another way to think about it is the smallest company in the world can look as large as the largest company in the world on the web.
Right, and he made it really concrete. Here's what's going to happen. The smallest company in the world can look as large as the largest company in the world, right? He had numbers, he had data. This is a much larger clip where he really talks about how profound this is going to be for how we communicate. But he's painting that vision, and that is what he got people really excited, because here's the world that's possible on the other side of what I'm proposing. And often I think we tend to undermine or not give credit to the possibilities of what we're creating. So not being afraid to say, this is incredible. Here's what becomes possible if we're successful in this endeavor. So we'll end here. I want to be mindful of time, so I'll go through quickly delivery, and then we should have some time for questions. So we talked about content. I want to briefly touch on voice and body language, why this matters. So research tells us our nonverbal cues can affect the feelings and attitudes of others more than the actual words that we say. Right, so I could say, having a really great time, or yeah, having a really great time, right? We read more into voice and body language, or a lot of speakers, this is so common, they'll say, we'll see actually Elon Musk, really excited to be here. You don't seem very excited to be here. So from the beginning, you create this disconnect. Guest speaker in our class from a company called Quantified Communications. They take big data, apply it to public speaking, and look at what creates influence. And they found the #1 factor is passion. Speakers who are the most passionate tend to be the most influential. Obama, Steve Jobs, Oprah, right? We feel it through their content, right? The stories they tell, their voice, their body language. Second was knowledgeable. So sounding, this isn't actually having knowledge, but sounding like you know what you're talking about. Research, data, your tone of voice. Voice is a full quarter of your impact, which we'll see in a minute. Presence, just your general demeanor, body language, and then content, meaning your message, was just 11%. So which this tells us is your message alone, your idea is not what's going to persuade, inspire. It's how you bring it to life with stories, examples, data, and then deliver it that matters. So we're gonna watch a clip now so you can see the power of delivery, content aside.
Hear that? That's nothing. Which is what I, as a speaker at today's conference, have for you all. I have nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Zippo. Nothing smart. Nothing inspirational. Nothing even remotely researched at all. I have absolutely nothing to say whatsoever. And yet, through my manner of speaking, I will make it seem like I do. Like what I am saying is brilliant. And maybe, just maybe, you will feel like you've learned something. Now, I'm gonna get started with the opening. I'm gonna make a lot of hand gestures. I'm gonna do this with my right hand. I'm gonna do this with my left. I'm gonna adjust my glasses. And then I'm gonna ask you all a question. By show of hands, how many of you all have been asked a question before? Okay, great, I'm seeing some hands. And again, I have nothing here. Now, I'm gonna react to that and act like I'm telling you a personal anecdote. Something to break the tension, something to endear myself a little bit, something kind of embarrassing. And you guys are gonna make an awe sound. It's true, it really happened. And now I'm gonna bring it to a broader point. I'm gonna reel you back in. I'm gonna make it intellectual. I'm gonna bring it to this man right here. Now, what this man did was important, I'm sure. But I, for one, have no idea who he is. I simply Google image the word scientist. And now, you see, I'd like it to seem like I'm making points, building an argument, inspiring you to change your life, when in reality, this is just me buying time. Now,
So what stood out for you in that? What made that engaging? You can call it out, chat.
Element of surprise that it was actually nothing.
Yes, exactly. So the humor, the surprise, his tone of voice, me buying time, make it feel like you're learning something. And so when our tone of voice matches the content, it's so much more engaging, right? This is exciting. This is a huge breakthrough where our customers are so frustrated and we need to figure this out, right? And so just really being mindful, energy and passion. So being mindful of your tone of voice. So whenever you have a presentation, an important meeting, even if you're speaking impromptu, we recommend just recording yourself or grabbing a friend and really understanding what is your vocal tone when you're speaking. We're going to watch now, in contrast, Elon Musk accomplished amazing things. Speaking is not one of his natural abilities. He has had coaching, so has improved, but this is an earlier speech. And so I just want you to contrast it to what we just saw in terms of his delivery.
Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to talking about the SpaceX Mars architecture, and what I really want to try to achieve here is to make Mars seem possible, make it seem as though it's something that we can do in our lifetimes, and that you can go. And is there really a way that anyone could go if they wanted to? I think that's really the important thing. So, I mean, first of all, why go anywhere, right? I think there are really two fundamental paths. History is going to bifurcate along two directions. One.
We'll stop it there, but fidgety, arms crossed. But this could be so exciting, right? We're going to Mars. He could talk about being a boy in Mars or what this means for him, or just all painting a vision of the future. Imagine. So with his content, with his body language, his voice, he could really bring this to life. And so when our delivery isn't as powerful as it could be, it's just a missed opportunity to show that passion, to inspire, connect. I'm going to go through the rest a little bit quickly now, just to be mindful of time. This is normally a 2-hour workshop. But I wanted to offer now, I'm very happy. Gilbert will send a link to my website. I have 30-minute free info sessions. So if any of you have any questions, you just want to chat about something coming up for you, very happy to offer my time, gives a good friend, as he mentioned, and been doing this a long time. So sign up and happy to chat. So delivery, I think of as what gets you off the ground, right? It's what engages the audience in the moment. It has them sit up, pay attention. I want to hear what this person has to say. You seem authentic. And then content is what lives on beyond the talk presentation itself. It's what tells the audience how you want them to think, what you want them to do. And so it's just, we often spend 90, if not 100% of our time on content, when delivery is just as important, as we just saw. So visual, Bill Clinton, master at this. The sweet spot here is generally you want to be balanced. So if you're standing equal weight on both feet, taking up more space, you look more confident. Open, so this is not crossed off. In person, it's eye contact. On Zoom, it's looking at the camera. On Zoom, I like to put the boxes right underneath the camera. So you're still looking at people, but it looks like you're looking at the camera as a trick. And in the resource guide, there's different sections. There's one on body language, and there's a video clip you can watch that will go through all of these best practices. So I won't do it now for time, but you'll have that to go through. And then I'll touch on voice. So Margaret Thatcher, why I have her, for two reasons. One, her voice was said to be one of her most potent political weapons, and it hit this sweet spot. It was said to be powerful and persuasive, yet soft and cajoling. But why I also have her is because the voice that she took on as the Iron Lady was not her natural speaking voice. She trained at the Royal Academy to have this powerful voice. And so we'll watch a clip in a minute, but I want to mention there's research that tells us people decide how trustworthy or dominant we are within seconds of hearing our voice. So they literally just had people say hello, even in different languages, and it was virtually unanimous if someone thought you were trustworthy or not, or dominant or not. And it doesn't mean they were right. It just means that, so for trustworthiness, if I'm really monotone and speaking like this, there's not a lot of trust because you're not really seeing how I'm feeling, right? So I'm not creating that with the vocal variety that we saw in the TED clip. Or if I'm talking really fast or have lots of up talk or I'm speaking from my throat, I don't sound as powerful, confident, I don't have that gravitas. So there's things that are happening with our voice that are signaling something, often unintentionally. This is Margaret Thatcher, before and after.
Mrs. Thatcher, it's always supposed to be a tremendous ordeal, maiden speech. Was it for you?
Oh, very much so. I've done a good deal of other speaking, but speaking in the House of Commons is quite different. It's a unique experience.
Right, very trustworthy maybe, but not very powerful. Oh yes, very lovely, nice experience. So now the next clip we'll watch, she has a middle transformation and then a final one.
I've been so busy that I haven't had really much time to think about it. After all, I know I'm still only me, and so do my family. But I'm very much aware of the responsibilities and a little bit apprehensive. Who wouldn't be when you think of the names that I follow?
Let me answer that very deeply, because I feel very strongly about it. The greatest divisions this nation has ever seen were the conflicts of trade unions towards the end of a Labour government.
Big difference, right? It's like a completely different person. And it's for you, so maybe less warmth here, but there is a lot more power and confidence. And so it's just to have this range and to be intentional, right? You know your audience, you're like, do I need to be warmer and have them feel assured? It's a time of crisis. Do I need to be more powerful and in command? And there's ways to do it. So her voice is more resonant, speaking from her diaphragm. In the resource guide, there's exercises that you can do every day to have a more resonant voice. She slows down. More confident speakers speak more slowly. There's more pauses. So all of these are things you can incorporate. And again, happy to answer questions separately or even talk through your own voice and certain changes that could help you be more powerful or effective. So for competence, it's pace and power. It's slowing down. It's more vocal power, speaking from your diaphragm. And then warmth, it's the resonance, the vocal variety. And so it's just, again, this is just awareness around anything you might be doing that's taking away from your impact and anything you could be doing to help you be more powerful, more persuasive. So we're going to bring it home with Oprah. You're going to see her put everything together, the storytelling, the voice, the knowing her audience. So this is her Golden Globe speech from a couple years ago. Very short. This is about 9 minutes. And yet afterward, Twitter and Facebook were blowing up with Oprah for president. Oprah should lead this country, which I think is incredible because it wasn't even a political speech. This is a Hollywood acceptance speech. And yet she got Oprah for president. The end of her speech, this is the beginning, but she tells a story. Her voice is powerful and slow. There's emotion. And so now she brings it home at the end. So good. But there's so many things, right? It's the personal story that she has lots of stories throughout. Even if that same content with a different voice, it wouldn't have been as powerful. So I recommend watching the entire speech. It's about 9 minutes. And what's even more interesting, if you watch the year before Meryl Streep spoke, it's just not as powerful. She doesn't have the personal story. She doesn't have the voice. And so the contrast, I think, makes this even more incredible. So to conclude, just a final piece is just rehearsal. Steve Jobs was known to rehearse relentlessly over and over again. So if you have an important presentation or even an impromptu meeting with certain speaking points that you want to get across, just practice, not even in your head, but out loud. The out loud makes a difference. I'm sure you can speak to this as well. He has a great article, Bad Presentation Gone Good. Just the reps and the feedback, and you can really hone it over time. I want to mention we're presenting virtually a lot now, and so engagement is more important than ever. So you can do that through questions. As you saw, I asked you a lot of questions, the chat, call it out loud. Asking the audience to imagine something can engage them, telling stories, simple slide design, and then just your voice becomes even more powerful. So if you do all these things, you can become much more effective at changing how people think, shaping their actions. And as again, this was short today, but I wanted to pack a lot in so you have all the best practices. You can feel free to email me, lauren@resonatecoaching.co. But you have worksheets, there's a audience analysis, there's a outline guide if you're putting a presentation together, and then reading, etc. And happy to speak for 30 minutes with anyone that has questions or anything else that comes up. So thank you, everyone. And then lastly, we love feedback, as Gib mentioned. So would love your feedback on what you learned today, anything that you loved, anything that you would like different for next time. You can hold up your phone for the QR code.
Cool, Lauren. Thanks a ton. I love that you took us from Martin Luther King to Oprah. That's just a wonderful journey.
Thank you.
And yes, I worked with Lauren about 4 or 5 years ago. I saw you guys saying nice things about me. I don't deserve it. So for sure, take advantage of those 30 minutes. Laura, when you're ready, I can put together a virtual test drive easily for you. And I can show you some of the hacks. I am doing a culture workshop in 10 minutes. So you can see kind of stuff I'm doing today. So Lauren, I'm going to let you close it out with your last words, and then we'll shut down the room so we can set up for the next workshop.
I'd love to leave you with just how much is possible. I taught a 10-week course at the GSB, and students left entirely different speakers. So anyone, whoever you work with me, someone else, like just even on your own through dedicated practice, you can become incredible. There's amazing clips of Steve Jobs about to throw up before a TV interview, Oprah being kind of like, not so engaging. So this really just is knowing what to do, practicing, and then it's amazing how powerful and compelling you can become. I'm sure you would echo that, right?
Absolutely. If you haven't done it yet, the QR code is there. You just hold up your phone as though you're taking a photo, and a link will magically pop up. Or if you look over the chat, I've just sent the SurveyMonkey link to everybody. And this is my open secret. Just frickin' ask for feedback, and that's how you can learn what's working and not. Lauren, thanks a ton. It was absolutely a delight to have you. And thanks, Product Leader Summit peeps, for being here. And I hope you'll enjoy the second workshop just as much as the first. So I'm going to hit the end button, and you'll be dropped into the ether. But look forward to seeing some of you at the culture workshop, which is next. Thanks so much, Lauren. Goodbye.